I haven't read them all, but it's much more successful than it has been in previous times that I've done that. It might be red, but it won't be lovely, it'll be covered in blood. About a orc who retires from murdering. I think they are endearing, even though they're like ruthless, bloodthirsty killers. Hello and welcome back to another day of Bookmas, and today I'm going to be doing my wrap up for the last 3 months. So if you remember, I did a TBR for 3 months, so my autumn TBR, just because I found every time I did like a monthly TBR I would never stick to it and I always put way too many books in it. So I've decided to do a tri-monthly one just for each season so that I can then hopefully actually read a lot of the books in it. So if you haven't watched that TBR, do check it out. I have managed to read quite a few of the books on that TBR, so I have kind of stuck to it. I haven't read them all, but it's much more successful than it has been in previous times that I've done that. So I'm quite pleased with myself. So in the 3 months that I'm talking about, I have read 16 books. I'm not going to talk about all of them on this because I have done reading vlogs for 2 of those, or 2 groups of those books. So for the manga and the romantic fiction, I'm not going to be going into those, as well as a couple later on, but I'll tell you about those later, because I have done full reading vlogs for them all, with wrap-ups at the end of those for each video, just kind of giving a brief overview. So if you would like to watch those, I will obviously link them all down below, so you know what's in those. For the manga, I have A Man and His Cat, which I gave 5 stars, Spy Family, I gave 4 stars, Jujutsu Kaisen, which I gave 4 stars, the Yukuzu's Guide to Babysitting, which I gave 3 stars, and Chainsaw Man, which I also gave 3 stars. They're all parts of the series, so they're all the first ones in the series. And then for the romantic fiction, or like smut, historical romance smut, I did Romancing the Duke by Tessa Dare, which I gave 3 stars, The Duchess Deal, also by Tessa Dare, I also gave 3 stars, and The Highwayman by Kerrigan Brine, and I gave that 2 stars. They all will be up by now as previous videos, so if you would like to watch those, do. But going on into the actual books that I'm going to talk about, we have my new all-time favourite author. So if you follow me on any kind of social media or watch any of my videos other than this one, you know I love this dude, Joe Abercrombie. So I read 2 of his books in the last few months. The last book in the first trilogy in his first law world, which starts with The Blade Itself, then it goes Before They Are Hanged, and then The Last Argument of Kings. I gave this 4 stars. I think I wasn't wholly in the mood to read this book, and I kind of pushed myself to get through it. I don't know why. I wasn't really in a reading mood, and I don't know, I felt like it was just a little bit slower than other books. Even though it was coming to the end, and I still loved it, I still think it was an incredible book, I just didn't love it as much as I have his other books. And it also was so depressing at the end. Like, grimdark fantasy, you're not guaranteed a nice ending as it is. Do not come to Joe Abercrombie thinking you're going to get things tied up in a nice lovely red bow. It might be red, but it won't be lovely, it'll be covered in blood. I gave this 4 stars. It's got all the traits of Abercrombie in it. I'm kind of discovering now it's dark humour, so it is funny despite all the darkness that it is, but it's also incredibly hopeless. There is no hope at all. But he's got some of the best characters I think I've ever read. They're so endearing is the word, but I don't know how I think they are endearing, even though they're like ruthless, bloodthirsty killers. They are. They don't. Somehow he manages to get you on their side every time. So I gave this one 4 stars. It wasn't my favourite in the series, but I still think it's an incredible book. This book though, the next one, is standalone, one of the first standalones in the world. You do have to read them kind of in publication order, I would suggest. So this is the next one that I read, Best Served Cold. We're following completely different characters in the same world, but like on a different continent. So it does feel like quite different. You still got his dark humour, his hopelessness, and his brutality. But I adored this book. I thought it was so good. It's got everything I love in a book. It's got kind of a heist, although instead of trying to find things and like steal things, they're trying to murder people, but it's got all that heist kind of planning. It's got the group coming together, all that kind of thing. So I just love this. I thought it was brilliant. It was so good. I don't want to talk about it too much in case it won't spoil that one. Do you want to know? We follow one of the side characters that we are introduced in this book as he kind of like travels across to this continent. We also have an entirely new character, Monza, who is very revenge driven. Her brother was murdered by her boss, who is the king, or wants to be the kind of ruler of this kingdom. So she's on a mission to enact revenge and kill all the people that were involved in the murder of... That's how cold it is in here. I don't know if you can see that on the screen. but I can see my breath. So yes, she is trying to get revenge on him. And to do that, she gets a group together of different characters, and it's just everything I kind of love in a book is in this book. So I gave this obviously 5 stars. The next book I read was The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. I read this mainly because it is set in Italy and I read it on holiday in Italy. And I haven't read Maggie O'Farrell. She's obviously very much loved by readers who read this genre, and I was kind of in a historical fiction kind of mood, but I didn't love it as much as I was hoping to. I think I gave it a 4 stars, but I'm actually going to lower it to 3, just because the topic I think was so interesting, and I found the most interesting bit about it was her author's note at the end explaining more about the history. I wish we'd seen that in the book. So we follow a girl who's young and she is kind of given in marriage to a duke, but there's something kind of amiss with him and everything's a little bit dodgy, and we're going from 2 timelines. One where they're kind of in a hidden cabin kind of like place in the woods. It's not a cabin, it's a much bigger place than that idea, and she thinks that she's going to be murdered by him, and then the timeline of her leading up to the marriage in this point. And then it kind of felt like it was building up to this point, but the only interesting bit was the end, when I then wanted to see what happened after the end. So I wish that was the middle point of the book rather than the end, and actually it was a little bit faster and we just got a little bit more afterwards. It just kind of ended and I was kind of left feeling like, well, you've only just got interesting. So I was a little bit underwhelmed by this book, and as I said, read the author's note at the end because the history sounds like really interesting and I'd like to know more about that, but actually reading this book I don't think was that. It wasn't all that I hoped it to be. So next, the other 2 books that I'm probably not going to go into too much detail on because I also have a reading vlog of me reading those, and that is The Legends and Latte by Travis Baldry and The Rivers of Silver by Shannon Chakraborty. So this I gave 4 stars. It's a super cozy fantasy read about a orc who retires from murdering and decides to open up a coffee shop, and no one's heard of coffee, so she has to pull in all these people to help her build this coffee shop. And it's just a cozy, slightly romantic fantasy, high fantasy but low stakes as the cover says, with just a fun group of people coming together, and it's exactly what it is. It's a cozy read but in a fantasy setting. And then The Rivers of Silver is a short story collection from the City of Brass Daevabad trilogy. I really enjoyed this actually. It makes me want to reread the series, so hopefully I can do that soon. I remembered a lot more than I thought I would. We follow a few of the characters from the main trilogy as well as some kind of other ones that just kind of shine a new light on a lot of the relationships in the trilogy that we didn't get in the main one. So like with Jamshid and Muntande, and then Dara as well, and Ali and Nahiri. So we get all those characters as well. We see them all again, and just a little bit more than what we had, and it was lovely. And the alternative epilogue makes me want there to be another series from this world. I think that would be such a good continuation if she did that, following those characters instead, and I would love to see that. I think that would be really cool. But I won't spoil it as to who that's about in case you haven't read it. So the book that I didn't finish in that reading vlog is Where Are You? I Have Lost You, but I have taken you off the shelf, so you must be somewhere. There you are. The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. So I finished this after finishing the vlog, and I actually really enjoyed it. I think there was high and low points. It took a while to get going. It was incredibly confusing for the first 50 to 60%, I would say, but not necessarily in a bad way. I like a little bit of info dumping just to ground me, especially in a fantasy that's got such a unique magic system. It's all about nature and it's kind of dying the magic system. So I would have liked a little bit more info dumping. It kind of does have a lot of names that are very similar, so I did get a little bit confused on that aspect. But there is a map at the front, so if you keep hold of that, it can help you a little bit. I also had my friend Buddy reading it with me as well, so I could ask her any questions for the bits that I'd missed or like sleepily read through and not properly paid attention to. So we're following quite a few points of views in this, a little bit more I think than necessary, but we've got, I would say, 3 main characters. We have Priya, who is a servant girl at the current time. However, 10 years ago, she was part of this orphan temple place. This temple where there was lots of orphans that lived there, and it was burnt down by the emperor at the time because the orphans who lived there were gaining these magical abilities that were threatening and they feared were dangerous. So he burnt the temple down, killing all the orphans there, except Priya managed to escape, and she is now a servant girl. We also follow Melanie, who is the sister of the current emperor. However, the current emperor is very tyrannical. He uses his religion kind of as a excuse for doing really horrific things. And one of those things is, well, wanting his sister to burn herself and kill herself in the name of their gods, the mothers. She refuses to do that, so he locks her up in this temple, this ruin of this temple, as punishment, and Priya ends up being her maidservant. So that's how they kind of meet in their relationship. We also have another character who I would say is a main character, and that's Bhumika, I think is how I'm going to pronounce it. And she is Priya's owner, I suppose. She's the wife of the ruler of the city, and the guy who's in charge. He's like a duke or a count or the equivalent to that. I can't remember his exact title though, sorry about that. They all have their own kind of agendas, their own revenge, or not slightly revenge, but own missions to kind of fix the past and what's happened in the past, but also survive the present, where they're kind of in very treacherous waters. It is a sapphic romance as well. I was kind of on the edge of whether or not I think it's good or not. I like it, but I also, discussing it with my friend that was body reading it, it is kind of insta-lovey almost. Milani's very ill at the start, so Priya and Milani don't get a lot of time, like conversation time, yet somehow they kind of are, like there's a chemistry there, but it just doesn't somehow, it comes across sometimes a little bit clunky, I think is how it was written, so it didn't come across the best, I don't think, but I'm really excited to see how it transfers, or like how it continues in the coming books. So hopefully, fingers crossed, it will still be a good one. I'm really excited to read it. I've got the second one already. I'm going to read that probably this month and continue on, just so that I keep it all fresh in my mind. I think it is going to be a trilogy though, and the third one isn't out yet. That doesn't come out, I think, till June, if I remember correctly. But I did really enjoy this. I think I gave it a 4 stars, and I would highly recommend it. The next book I read is another one, sorry, I'm not going to talk about in this video because I do have an entire video dedicated just to a review of this book, and that is The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson. I did give it a 5 stars. This is another one of my all-time favourite authors. I think he's phenomenal. It is completely spoiler-free, that review, so if you haven't caught up in the series, do feel free to watch that and see if this is a series that you'd like to enjoy. But it's phenomenal. I give it 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. I sobbed at that book. So the next book I read, and what I felt like I've been reading for forever, this came out I think in May of this year, and I bought it in May and I started in it in May, and I only just finished it a few weeks ago. And that is The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. If you like City of Brass, I do think you'll like this. I don't think it's nearly as good as that book, but it's good enough. It's kind of those ones that crosses over. It could be shelved in YA, I would say, just with the writing style. I think it's on the fence of being a YA book, and I think if I'd gone in with it that kind of thinking, that I would have enjoyed it a lot more. It just kind of didn't have the grit and the darkness that I like that comes, or like the heavy topic discussions. It just wouldn't have enough oomph for me, that I was just kind of missing something. So I was never drawn to pick it up. It was good enough that I wanted to finish it, but it did take me 4 months to finish it, reading like 50 pages here and there every so often. So we follow a girl who is a thief. She steals magical objects. She has a djinn friend who helps her do this, and a magic compass that directs her to these magical objects. So she steals them and resells them to make money. And then we also follow the prince, who's kind of a little bit of a wimp, a little bit of a coward. He's not got that much gumption, but they end up going on a journey to find something. I can't even remember that much about it. It just wasn't like, it fell in the resurrection trope, you know, where people come back to life that died. And I think as soon as you do that in a book, it just destroys any kind of tension that there could possibly have been when there's any kind of fight scene, because anyone could come back now. These 2 people came back to life. One was human, one was magical. That means that both people in that like world can come back to life. So that kind of lost any kind of drive for me to continue reading about it. I didn't really care for the romance in it, because it was a romance that happened in the past but still affected our current character, but because we'd never seen the build-up of the romance, it was just a little bit disjointed, I felt like. I don't know. It was an okay book. If you're interested in it, pick it up, read a few pages, see if you like it. I think you will tell from the first few pages whether or not that kind of style is for you, but I ended up giving this 3 stars, a low 3 stars I would say. And that's it. So those are all the books that I read in the last few months. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you read any of these and have any opinions, let me know if any of them are on your TBR and this has encouraged you or dissuaded you. It might have done. Do let me know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, it does really help my channel, and I will see you in the next video very soon.